Hi team! Today we are making a recipe based on our lesson this week of our good pantry essentials. So of course it's only fitting that we make a recipe that utilizes stuff that we probably already have in our cabinets, our pantries, our cupboards, right? We're going to be making a white chicken chili. This is a wonderful one pot, versatile pantry meal, just really using up the stuff that we already have. Not only that, it's perfect for this fall season because it's a good thick hearty soup, stick to your ribs, and it just is wonderful on those cold days out there. So first things first, we want to make sure that we're looking over our recipes so we can get out all the stuff we need, get our mise en place together, right? So I see here that I'm going to need 1 pound of boneless chicken, skinless chicken breast cut into half-inch cubes. All right, so I already have my chicken out. Now guys, I needed to thaw my chicken, so I ran it under some cool water, put it in a strainer bowl to thaw out. All right, so it's ready there for me. Okay, and then we're going to be cutting that. Other ways we could thaw our meat is we could put it in the microwave if time is of the essence. You could put it in the refrigerator, but my personal favorite way is just to run it under some cool water. So it's been nice and cool water rinsed, ready to go. All right, I also have out all of mine. Alright, I also went through my recipe, got out all of my dried herbs and spices, all of my canned goods, my onions, everything else I'm going to need on this recipe. And you'll notice here that I do have my utensils laid out for each. We don't want any cross-contamination. You don't want your oregano leaves and your cumin and so on and so forth. So I have my utensils that I need to measure each of my herbs and spices. All right, we see over here, I already have my chicken broth prepared. It says here that we need 2 cups of chicken broth. I have a dry base, so I rehydrated it and made my own broth. Otherwise, you could use cans of chicken broth if we have that in our pantry. You could use bouillon cubes and follow the directions on the package if you have that as well. All right, I also have out my oil, which we're going to be putting into our pot to preheat. So the pores in our pot open up and it turns it into a non-stick skillet. So when we're cooking our chicken and our onions, they're not going to be sticking to our pan. All right, I also have my knife, I have my ladle for when I'm ready to serve, and our scraper spatula for getting up all that fond off the bottom of the pot. All right, cutting boards out, everything's nice and clean, preventing any cross-contamination, and I feel like I'm set. I even have my bowl out because it does show on our recipe here that for our cans of beans that they should be drained and rinsed. So I have a bowl with a strainer, so quick and easy I can just pour them on in there and it's going to drain out, and then I can take that strainer over and rinse them. Of course, if you were at home, you could just drain it into the sink and rinse it out there. Alright, but without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Well, I see that it calls for 1 tablespoon of canola oil, or whatever oil we have on home that we like to work with, into our pot to make sure that we're turning it into a nice non-stick surface. Okay, we're going to have our pot on low for this. We want to cook it low and slow. Alright, we're not looking for boiling, we're not charring our onions. You know, we're not really browning and caramelizing our chicken quite yet. So we just want a nice low heat on our pot. Swirling that oil around, making sure it's coating all the surfaces. Filling up all the pores in there so nothing's going to stick. Alright, and while that's on a nice low flame, I'm going to go ahead and get started with dicing my onion. You see, my very first instruction is to saute our chicken, onion, and garlic powder in oil until the chicken is no longer pink. But to get to that step, first we have to dice our onion and dice our chicken. Alright, so since chicken is a raw meat, we're going to first dice our onion because we don't want to contaminate our cutting board here with chicken and then go into the onion, causing all that salmonella and possible, cross-contamination germs to get on our onion. So we're going to dice up our onion first, clean our surface off, move on to the chicken. Guys, as we dice this onion, we're just going to toss it right in the pot. Throw it all in there, right? This is a one-pot meal, easy peasy. So let's get our onions out. It does call for 1 medium onion. Mine are a little on the smaller side, so I wouldn't have grabbed 2. Gonna dice 1.5 up, see where we're at there, and maybe we'll add the other half as well. And if not, then we can save the remaining for a later recipe. Maybe make some breakfast with it tomorrow, nice omelet. Always making sure we're reducing our waste and reusing those items that are left over. So let's get to dicing. So remember in our lesson we just discussed the 6 steps to properly dice an onion. First, most important, is that we're using a very good sharp chef's knife with the proper grip. So I have my 3 fingers around the handle, my thumb and my forefinger on the bolster, giving myself the proper grip. Right, I have full control of this knife. It's nice and sturdy. It's not going to slip out of my hand. All right, and what is our first step? Well, first we have to cut off the root and the flower. Now remember, we want to try and use as much of this onion as possible, so we're just going to do a quick little shave of both sides. So this part, the flower here, take my blade, I'm up above my onion so I can see exactly what I'm doing. All right, just give it a nice quick slice. All right, turn it around, get into that root. Just a slight shave, giving as much of that onion as possible. All right, keeping our garbage handy behind us, throwing away what we don't need. What's next in our instructions? Right, step 2 is to cut your onion in half. Cut it in half as true as possible. You know, not asking to be perfect, but to ensure a nice even dice, just try to get it as close as you can. Okay. Next step, we're going to remove the skin. And why didn't I do this in the first place? Well, you'll see how much easier it is to remove the skin once you cut it in half. Versus if you have it whole and you have to peel all the way around that root and that flower. This just makes removing the skin a breeze. Look at that. It took me 2 seconds. Just nothing. Alright. Step 4. Alright, we've cut it in half, removed the flower, removed our skin. Now we're going to go into what we talked about, our radius or our sunshine cut. You see how the onion has already lines basically lined out there for us. We know that we need a nice mince diced with our onion here. So we're going to go ahead and follow along those lines with our radius or our sunshine cut. See how I'm kind of getting it just about like 1/4 an inch apart? I know that I want my dice to be small enough that there's going to be a little bit in each bite of my soup. You know, keeping in mind our serving, you know, this is a soup right with a spoon. We want all of our pieces to be small enough so we get a little bit of each ingredient in each bite. Right. So I got my radius cut, nice about 1/4 inch between those. Now the next step, we turn that using your proper hold again and just go through and do a nice dice. Doing about 1/4 inch apart again, so I'm getting uniform, small, nice dice pieces. And you notice I'm not sniffling, I'm not crying. This technique is wonderful for that. Alright, we have all this perfectly good onion here that we don't want to go to waste. Just continue cutting those ends with our radius cut and our dice. Beautiful, look how easy that was. Perfect size. Get the rest of my knife. Let's move on to onion half number 2 here. Going through again, proper hold, letting the blade do the work, not my strength. All the way down. Making nice bite-sized cuts. Alright, I'm down to the part here where I no longer have control over it, so I'm going to flip it over. Follow the lines again. Get as much of that onion as we can, reducing our waste. Alright, got pretty much all I can. There's just a small little chunk there left. Not bad, I'd say. Okay. Let's go ahead and throw that right in the pot so it can start doing its job. Scraping it up with our hands, not using the knife or the blade. You could also use a little flat scraper if you have one of those too. Oh, that already smells delicious. Peek. Nice slow little simmer there, low heat. Looking beautiful. Alright, give that guy a little stir. Make sure all of the onions are getting coated in that oil. Start releasing all those flavors. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and dice another onion because that was pretty small and I like a little bit more onion in my soup. So we'll let simmer in. We're just going to chop off this number 2 real quick. Alright, so it looked like about 1.5 of those onions felt good to me, so while that's simmering, we're going to move on to our chicken. Alright, so our recipe tells us that we need that cut into 1/2-inch cubes. Okay, camera cord out of the way here. Alright, so we rinsed off our cutting board from our onion, working with a fresh surface. Alright, and our recipe calls for 1 pound of boneless, skinless chicken breasts. Okay, so the pack that I had came with 6 chicken breasts, all right, and it was about just slightly over 3 pounds. So what that tells me is 2 chicken breasts equal about 1 pound. You could take it a step further. You could take your scale out and measure it out. Remember, there is 16 ounces in a pound, right, and there's 8 ounces in a cup. So what you could do is you could also get out a 2-cup measuring cup like the one I have here for broth, dice it up and fill it up and see if that works. All right, but I know here that I have about 1 pound of chicken, so I'm going to go through and we're going to get nice 1/2-inch dice size pieces, right, because just like with the onion, we want to make sure that we have an even bite size, small enough to get a chunk in each of our spoonfuls, right? And also we want to make sure that we make them uniform, because if they're different in size, they're going to cook at different temps, different levels too. I'm just going to go through and start making some strips. That way, as I am looking through it, I can keep an eye out for any tendons or any pieces that don't look so nice to me. Okay, so I cut about 1/2-inch strips there. That's looking good. Go ahead and do the same on the second breast. Okay. Now I can go through one by one and cut my little chunks. You know, and if you have chicken strips already at home, that would work. Just making sure we got nice uniform sized pieces. If you see any tendons, any little fat spots that don't look so nice to you, go ahead and cut those guys out. See, I got a little tendon here. I'm just going to gently slice around. We don't want to waste too much chicken, but we know that these tendons are never going to cook down nice and soft. And we don't want a fatty, chewy bite in our chicken, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Clean it up a little bit. See, got a little fatty tendon piece right there. Just cutting around it, save as much chicken as possible. This piece looks nice. Not seeing anything I need to remove. Good. Put around. Try to get the tendon. Get all that in there. This piece is a little bit bigger, so you might go ahead and cut your chunks in half once you go through it. Apologize, remember we share this kitchen with other classrooms, so they're making some smoothies behind me. The sound that we're hearing. Okay, almost made our way through here. Alright, if chicken looks nice bite-sized piece that we're looking for, might go through, see any big ones, just kind of cut them in half. We want an even cook time on all of our chicken. Alright, so we know that that goes right into the pot with our onions. Okay, so I am just going to go ahead and toss it on in. Now, a recipe also called for our garlic powder to go in here with it. Once I add this chicken, we're going to take a quick pause. We're going to go wash our hands, get rid of our chicken contaminated ingredients before we move on, okay? Alright, we've cleaned up our raw chicken mess. Stuff is cooking, smelling nice in here. Alright, we're going to go ahead and add our garlic powder. It shows in my recipe here that I need 1.5 teaspoons. I already had those laid out for myself. Now mine, this big container here, already has a leveler on it. So since I have a designated spoon just for this seasoning, I can go ahead and dip it on in, use my leveler, make sure it's nice and full, but not overflowing. Alright, right in the pot. Alright, get my 1/2 teaspoon out. Now guys, if you don't have garlic powder at home and you just have garlic salt, that's okay. You can use that too. Just maybe a little later into our recipe when it calls for us to add some salt, we just omit that part, right? You don't need to double up on the salt. It'll take away from the flavor. Get onions going, garlic, chicken. Things are already starting to smell wonderful in here. Now, if you look at the recipe, you'll notice that it calls for us to just cook the chicken until it's no longer pink. Alright, it doesn't say to cook it all the way through till it's brown, it just says till it's no longer pink. And why is that? Well, if you'll read on the recipe, you'll notice that once we add our beans, our broth, and all that good stuff, we're going to bring it to a boil, reduce it, and then let it simmer for 30 whole minutes. Right? We're getting rid of the pink, we're bringing it to the point where it's almost all the way cooked, but not completely to that step, because while it's simmering in there, you don't want it to overcook and become, tough. Not only that, while it's simmering all those good spices and herbs and seasonings, you want it to be able to absorb some of that flavor from our broth, from our beans, from all of our good stuff. So bringing it just to the point where it's just about cooked prevents overcooking and helps impart some of that flavor. Okay? So we're going to let this work. Practice some good multitasking. Let's give that one more stir. Great. Notice how I have it on a nice low heat. It's not cooking too fast, giving us time to work on other stuff. All right. So, moving on, our recipe calls for 2 15.5-ounce cans of Great Northern beans, drained and rinsed. Alright, well that's what we got this whole out ahead of time for us. So I got my 2 15.5-ounce cans here. Open that guy up. If you had a different type of bean at home, that's okay. Can use that too. Working with what we have in our pantry, that's the point of this lesson, after all. There we go. Can opener was giving me a little bit of a hard time. Run for my money. How nice would it be if we had one of those electric countertop ones, right? More equipment goals to go for. Oops, lost the lid. That's alright. Get that on now. We got the whole can in there. Move on to can number 2. Okay. So our chilies calls for 2 4-ounce cans of chopped chilies. It does not call for that to be drained or rinsed, so we can just pour the whole thing on in. Beautiful. See if we're not going to lose the lid this time. Alright, let's bring these over to our sink. Give them a nice rinse, and we'll be right back. Alright, got my beans nice and rinsed. Alright, let's open up our chilies. You know, guys, if you don't have cans of beans at home, and maybe you have bags of the dry stuff, that's okay. That'd work beautifully too. Just most of the time with those, they just need a little bit more love and care. Those require usually some soaking, so it'll probably require you to put them in a bowl of some water in your fridge, maybe for a couple hours, sometimes even overnight. Okay. Opening up our can, just getting myself prepared. Alright, so we see here that when our chicken is no longer pink, we are going to be adding our beans, our broth, our chilies, and our seasonings. Alright, so after I get these cans open, why not just go ahead and get our seasonings already nice and measured ahead of time so I can just dump them all in. Chicken and onions, a little stir here, making sure everything's cooking nice and even and happy. Give you a little peek, you can see that it's getting there. It's a little bit more white, but we still do have some pink pieces in there. So it shows me I have plenty of time to keep opening these cans and getting myself ready. Set the beans aside. Got one can open. Sure wish we had smell-o-vision because all we have so far is our garlic, chicken, and onions, and it's already smelling incredible in here. Alright, cans are open. Let's move on to our seasonings. So, we already got our garlic powder. Moving down the list, remember how our recipe, we talked about how it kind of goes in order of things you need? You know, we got our chicken, we already did our onion, and our garlic powder, the first three things that I wanted in the pot with our oil. Then it moves down to our beans, our broth, and our chilies, moving down into our seasonings. So I see that I need 1 teaspoon of salt. I already have that out and prepared for myself with its coordinating utensils, so I'm not cross-contaminating, which means I can just go ahead right into my container, make sure it's a nice level scoop, and put it on in. No cross-contamination here. Alright, we got our salt. We need ground cumin. We need 1 teaspoon of that. Its own little spoon. See, my container has its own nice little leveling spot, so I can just go on in with its designated measuring spoon. Get myself a nice overflowing spoonful. Level on out into the cup. You know, you don't have to do it this way with the cup. You could do it into a bowl. You could do it individually and just add it too if you want to take a little bit more time. I find this the quick and easy way. Alright, we got 1 teaspoon of dried oregano. Got our teaspoon here. You can see why it's nice having our individual ones. Could you imagine if you took your same spoon from your cumin, put it into your oregano, next time you go to use that oregano, you know, maybe making spaghetti or a sauce or something like that, you're going to have this random extra flavor in there and be like, what's that? Simple mise en place. Saves all of our spices. Alright, oregano in the bowl, cup. Alright, we also need 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. I know I got quite a large container of pepper here for just a small amount, but that's alright. We work with what we have in our kitchens, right? Oregano in. Overflowing, but not too full. Level that guy off. Into our cup. And I know that after this I'm not going to be using any of these tools anymore, so you see my dirty bowl here, I could add my utensils right into it that I know I'm done, keeping myself nice and clean and organized, and then I just have one thing to kind of grab and bring to my dish area when I'm all done. Alright, so we got our pepper. Our last spice is our cayenne. And this only calls for just a 1/4 teaspoon. Is adding just a little bit of heat, a little part of flavor, but we don't want it to be too spicy. So 1/4 teaspoon is the perfect amount. Now, with that being said, if you like a little bit more spicy meals, you can definitely add more so as you see fit. Alright. Well, now I see at the bottom of my ingredients that I also need 1 cup of sour cream and a 1/2 cup of heavy whipping cream. So why don't I have that out yet? Well, we don't need that until in our recipe after our soup has been simmering for at least 30 minutes. And we know from previous recipes that dairy does not like to be cooked at high heat for long periods of time. The proteins tend to break down in there and we don't want a curdly soup. So I am leaving that in my fridge until last minute when I absolutely need it so it stays fresh, it stays out of that temperature danger zone, and it's not impacting our recipe whatsoever. Alright, so we have our seasonings ready, our cans are all out, our beans are nice and rinsed. So let's take another peek back at our pot here. Get you a nice angle so you can kind of see what we're working with. Come on, camera, work with me. There we go. Give that guy another stir. It's looking pretty good. Alright, it's almost done. See, just a tiny bit of pink left. So let's give it just another minute and I'll bring all my stuff a little closer to me. So I'm ready to just dump it on in when I'm done. Go through, clean up my utensils. Anything that I can prepare for myself ahead of time. Alright, well, like how we talked about, this is just a nice one-pot pantry kind of a dump meal. Give that a final stir. Look for any pieces that may be pink. I think that we're looking pretty solid. Okay, so let's add our beans. Thoroughly rinsed. Put our dishes to the side. Alright, adding our 2 cups of broth. Notice I just kind of say broth in general. I'm using chicken broth, but you could use veggie broth. Whatever you have, whatever you like. I just think that with a chicken chili, a nice chicken broth is a good complement. Alright, the whole can of our chili is in there. Juice and all. Parting awesome flavor. Can number 2. Get out there. Okay. And our pre-mixed seasonings. Look how easy that was. Awesome. Let's give everything a nice stir here. Get it all thoroughly incorporated. You can already see how hearty of a soup this is. Look at all those filling bites. Oh, it's beautiful. Okay. So, next calls for us to bring this to a boil. So let's turn our heat up and watch it and wait for it to boil. You can see some bubbling action going on around the outside. And give that a stir, kind of disperse some of that energy throughout our soup here, or chili, whatever you want to call it. Alright, so instructions say that once we bring it to a boil, we're going to reduce the heat and simmer it. Remember when we were talking about our different styles of cooking? Simmering is the low and slow, those tight little bubbles, you know, barely breaking the surface, not the rolling boil like you can kind of see around the edges here. So it's almost pretty much to a full boil there, so that tells me that I need to turn my heat down again to a nice low. Okay, and we're going to simmer that uncovered for 30 minutes. So go ahead, set yourself a timer for 30 minutes. And then at that time, we're going to be adding our sour cream and our heavy cream, and then our chili is almost done. Okay, you can kind of see, so if I can give you a better glimpse, you know, around the edges here, you see how it's just lightly boiling, just a little, or bubbling, just a little bit of action, not the roiling, not the surface breaking bubbles, just a little bit of action in there. That's exactly what we're looking for. We don't want to overcook our chicken. We don't want to overcook our beans. We just want to impart all that good flavor, let those beans and chicken really soak up all the flavor from the broth and the seasonings. So we're just going to let it do its job here. Keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't start to boil too much, and check on it again in about 30 minutes. Giving a little check halfway into our cooking here. See, it's doing nice simmering things. Not too big of bubbles. Remember, simmering is at around a temperature of 190 degrees. Higher than that, you start to enter into the field of the boiling level. All things looking good, smelling good, doing their job. All right, it's been about 30 minutes, so it's time to add our remaining ingredients. So we see our recipe calls for 1/2 cup of heavy whipping cream, all right, and 1 whole cup of sour cream. Now remember how we talked about there's 8 ounces in a cup, 16 ounces in a pound. I know that my container of sour cream here, guys, is 16 ounces. All right, so it's 1 pound, so that means that I need, for 1 cup, I need 1/2 of this container. So I got my measuring cup out here. We're just filling it up to the brim. That way I know when I'm done with this, what's left over is exactly a cup. So if I choose to make this recipe again, or if I need a cup of sour cream for something else, I can just go ahead and use the whole rest of the container. Not wasting the dish. All right, let's get you back over to the soup here. Okay. All that sour cream out of our cup. See, there's a little bit of heavy whipping cream left in my cup here, so I'm gonna make sure all that gets in. Okay. So I see on my recipe that it calls for this to be removed from heat. So we just turn the heat off, or you can just move it over to another burner. But just make sure that heat's off, because remember, like how we talked about, dairy does not like high heat. We do not want a curdly chili. So let's remove it from the heat. Get all of that nice and incorporated. Make sure we don't have any chunks of sour cream buried in there. And that's it. Alright team, we're switching over to our ladle now, because this soup is perfect. It is ready to go and to be served. So, a couple different ways we could garnish it. Let me get my cup, my spoon out here. Alright, so I have a couple things. We have some shredded pepper jack, maybe some shredded cheddar. If you like things a little spicier, maybe some crushed pepper, some hot sauce. Alright, well let's go ahead and scoop some up. Well look guys, look who just joined us. Hey Miss P. You're just in time. White chicken chili is done. Would you like some?
I definitely want some. I could smell it, and I was
Oh,
like...
you already brought yourself a bowl and spoon. I'm proud of you. Alright, so we have some pepper jack, we have cheddar, we have parsley, crushed red pepper, whatever you'd like to garnish it with. I am going to roll.
Because garnish is awesome. It makes our food more fun. we eat with our eyes, right? It
Mhm.
adds flavors. So let's think of some ways, right? We got our cheddar, we had pepper jack. I had some of that. We still have some of our sour cream.
Mhm.
So oftentimes we'll see things like maybe a little dollop of sour cream there.
We like it. I'm gonna go for the pepper jack myself. I want a little more spice.
Just thinking like,
Doesn't impart as pretty of a color as the cheddar does, but the flavor's there. Look at that. Crushed red pepper
I'll find my
flakes.
spice somehow, Miss
Mhm.
Collins.
Some pepper jack, some crushed red pepper. Oh yeah, I'm missing that parsley. About to have a family style luncheon here. A little parsley for some color. Look at that.
Look at that.
We just used all of our pantry staples, made a warm, hearty meal for this fall time, and we're going to enjoy it. Well, I hope that you guys give it a chance. Go at home. I can't wait to see what you come up with your recipes. And we'll see you on Friday. Bye.